Next, I'm talking with Hector Garcia, Executive Director of Chicano Latino Affairs Council, coming up on the St. Paul Forum. Welcome to the St. Paul Forum. I'm Lisa Tabor, your alternate co-host, along with John Forty, while Mike Wassenaar is on sabbatical. Today I'm talking with Hector Garcia, Executive Director of Chicano Latino Affairs Council. Welcome, Hector.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate you inviting me.
Well, we are eager to hear about the Chicano Latino Affairs Council and all of the work that you're doing, including the Global Cities effort. So let's start in first. Can you give us some background on the Chicano Latino Affairs Council?
The Latino Affairs Council has been around since 1978, and it is one of 4 minority and American Indian councils. We're bridges between our communities and the governor's office and the legislators. So we facilitate communication between those 2 areas, and we try to advise the governor and the legislators on matters of interest for our community, as well as inform the community itself on services and programs offered by the government. We also publicize achievements of the Latino community through our website. I write articles for a couple of Spanish-speaking papers, La Voz and La Prensa. And we hold community gatherings, forums, dialogues, and we do the same thing at the legislature.
So what is your work focusing on today, recently?
Well, education, that's one area where I've been immersed quite a bit because, as you probably know, our community has a high dropout rate from high school and a low enrollment in higher education, which is of great concern to the whole community and to us especially, because that's what we need to address by making the proper recommendations to the legislature so that what is needed to take place on the part of the community and the legislature will happen.
So what do you hope the legislature will be able to do?
Well, we've made recommendations in regards to the background of those disparities. And what we need to do right now is to begin to draft a specific recommendation for a bill that we will submit to some of the legislators, ask them to champion such a bill, and then hope that it gets passed.
Okay. And the bill is designed to direct resources?
Well, not necessarily. It depends. If there are resources available, then yes, it would be directed to try to attract some of those resources to education. For example, you probably read quite a bit about the Race to the Top,
Yes.
and the possibility that millions of dollars would be given to Minnesota. Unfortunately, Minnesota was not selected, but that would have been an instance where our community and other communities would have benefited from available federal funding. I don't know specifically what we will be presenting at the next legislative session, but we will be meeting with different legislators. We will be meeting with people in our community and at the public schools, colleges, universities to discuss what exactly we can do to remedy that situation.
That's great. The work needs to be done. Can't believe we lost
Yes,
that money.
Well,
And that certainly isn't the only money that we'll probably be losing if our children aren't graduating. And
that is the main dilemma, that if our children do not gain the proper education for whatever reasons, then they cannot be getting a good job, generating income for themselves, their families, and for the cities in which they live. So it behooves everybody, it's in everybody's interest to try to get the best possible education for our kids, be they Latinos or whatever.
Right. And you're working on this issue with the other councils as well?
Oh, yes, yes. Whenever possible, we try to collaborate with the Council on Black Minnesotans, Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, and the Indian Affairs Council.
So education is one area, economic development is another.
That's another one in which, as you well know, I am very committed and have a great deal of passion, because I believe that the Latino and the other minority and American Indian communities can contribute a great deal to the economy of our cities and to the economy of the state. And you mentioned the global cities when we first started talking, and that is an area where I think we can really have a turnaround. The global cities concept is relatively new, but it's also very old. Let me start with the old first. There have been global cities for many years: New York, London, Tokyo. But this concept has gained additional interest because with globalization, several economists and urban observers have proposed that it is cities where globalization is taking place. Cities are the command centers, so to speak, of globalization. And so now you have cities like Chicago, like Madison, Wisconsin, becoming global cities. Why? Because they have several types of resources, communications resources, transportation resources, business services such as international legal services, accounting services, consulting services, advertising, and other services that make that particular city very attractive for international investors, international visitors, people from other cities, other states, other countries who would like to work there because they see that that's where the action is taking place.
So yeah,
so
what
that's the term
them?
that, well, obviously if you have educated people who are looking for an exciting job where there's innovation, where there's creativity, and consequently where the economy is doing well, then you have those people flocking to such cities looking for employment, trying to bring their new ideas, their background in education, in experience, in culture to the table, so that those cities all of a sudden become very dynamic, very creative, very active, and start attracting all kinds of different employees, not just highly educated one, but also low-skilled employment as well, because these are the people that have to provide services at hotels, at the restaurants. Obviously, all of these highly educated people need to entertain themselves.
Yes.
And one of the things that attracts them is knowing that those cities are inviting, that they welcome divergent cultures, people who are not like the natives of that particular city.
Sure.
And that's where our community comes in.
How can you tell the difference between a community that that seriously values diversity and sees that as an asset, and a community that just makes it sort of face value?
Well, there's one indicator. For example, if you go to New York City, you have Little Italy. If you go to San Francisco, you have Chinatown. If you go to Los Angeles, you have Olvera Street. These are prized treasures for those cities. They don't just exist like our cultural corridors in the Twin Cities, but they have high visibility. They're renowned not only within that city, but throughout the country and in other nations. That is one of the indicators that the city values highly diversity.
So, but what's the argument? Because there are millions and millions of people, especially millions of Chinese, millions of Italians. How about here in Minnesota where there aren't millions of people in one place?
Obviously, you're dealing with a much smaller population in St. Paul or in Minneapolis than in some of those cities, but you can still prize and welcome and enhance a cultural corridor such as the one that is in District del Sol, Selby Street, Franklin Avenue for American Indians, University Avenue for Asian communities. So it's very much in the attitude in whether the city consider these assets and points of destination for foreign travelers and for people from other states, and integrate them into the plans for that city, in not just tourism plans, but economic plans, connecting them to other important things. For example, one of the things that happen in a global city is they have a world-class airport. They also have every one of the resources that I've mentioned, the museums, the restaurants, the casinos, the cultural corridors, the centers of investment, the business buildings, all connected.
The infrastructures, essentially.
And interconnected, so that they become one package, one point of destination.
So you're really sort of talking about a regional aspect as well to the infrastructure. So it's not just focusing on developing Minneapolis or St. Paul, it's developing the entire region, which includes Bloomington as an airport and the different transportation corridors.
Yeah, you know, like all of the streets that I mentioned, they're not immediately next to each other, but they can be easily connected. What I'm describing has not taken place yet in the Twin Cities, but this is one of the things that we've been discussing with MnDOT, with the Met Council, with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and others, to see if they find this worthwhile and attractive. I think given the current economic crisis, it would be tremendous for our cities, the Twin Cities, to pursue such a concept and attract innovative, creative, highly educated people from all over the world.
The question is really, is there a choice for our leaders or for the state?
You have cities like Detroit who have made a different choice, who are looking towards the past to try to recapture their past glory. And it hasn't been very good for them. Not everybody is choosing to connect with globalization. There are many fears about globalization because there are side effects that have been negative. It hasn't all been positive, but we're too far into globalization to all of a sudden say, no, we're going to do away with the internet, we're going to do away with free trade, we're going to do away with all of the things that pertain to globalization. It's impossible to do it now, so I think the only wise choice is to connect more intensely, more committedly to globalization by making our cities global cities.
So what is one step that Minnesota can take to get to that point?
One easy step that we have been discussing with several people is, given that there's already a focus of attention on the light rail central corridor down University Avenue, and that avenue happens to also be a cultural corridor where you have a lot of Asian businesses, a lot of Latino businesses. There used to be a lot of African businesses there as well, and there are still some African American businesses. To join those two concepts in people's minds, and also in tangible ways. As you know, there are some people who are afraid that the light rail central corridor would displace a lot of those businesses. We're trying to get people to think in the opposite way, that those businesses enhance the light rail central corridor.
Right. Good. We're going to get into that.
Okay.
Thank you. If you're just joining us now, I'm talking with Hector Garcia, Executive Director of Chicano Latino Affairs Council. So let's go get into that, the Central Corridor. I love that conversation. So there are, I think, the existing businesses and the existing, a lot of the advocates for residents and organizations on the Central Corridor would agree that the businesses are highly, they're strong assets and they're very important and they need to stay. How does that get translated effectively to the leaders and the people who have resources to make sure, or to help them understand that that's where they need to invest?
You know, you just reminded me of something that I heard Marilyn Carlson Nelson tell me once when we gave her an award when I was the head of NCCJ for Minnesota and the Dakotas. And
what is that, please?
The National Conference for Community and Justice, which used to be known in the past by the National Conference of Christians and Jews before 2000. And as they expanded the communities that they were involved with, they changed the name. So what Marilyn Carlson Nelson said was he drew a circle and left me out. I drew a larger circle and drew him in. I think that's a beautiful,
that is beautiful.
Beautiful statement, and it speaks to what you're asking. In order for everyone to be part of one concept, there's got to be something in it for everyone. You know, what's in it for me, what's in it for you, what's in it for the other people around the table. And what we're trying to do is not to focus on let's protect these businesses along the Central Corridor. Let's marry them to the idea of a better cultural corridor, Central Corridor light rail line in a global metro area. The idea is that if the cities were to prize, embrace this divergent culture that the minority businesses represent, they are conceptually conveying the message that the city embraces divergent cultures, not just within it, but outside of its borders, with other states, with other nations. And that is very symbolically important.
Well, when you're talking marriage, marrying, you're talking about partnerships. And
yes, of course.
Any ideas about the partnerships that could be created or even have been created so far in support of this global cities or / World Cultural Heritage District idea?
You just mentioned one of them. The World Cultural Heritage District is one of those partnerships. Now we're trying to connect that to the MnDOT plans, to the Met Council plans, and to the aspirations of all leaders in the Twin Cities who would like to make our economy recover its vitality and attract, again, all the innovators which have traditionally worked in the Twin Cities so successfully, and exploit the large number of international organizations that are right here today. The resources are already there. It's a matter of connecting them conceptually. And that is why those very small businesses become so significant, because, again, they're a symbol of an idea, a new idea that can turn everying around.
And they also have their own connections. Right,
you mean
that
the
can be
businesses?
leveraged. Yeah, immigrants who are still connected to their home countries and perhaps even doing business there. And
what you just described is something that international corporations have discovered themselves in the last several years. Large international corporations used to have, say, for example, a group of Latinos working at their companies, and all of a sudden it dawned on them, why do we have them working in North Dakota or selling to Iowa? You know, these people have relatives, friends in their countries of origin. They know the culture, they speak the language. Let's connect them to where they can be most profitable. And that is a connection that the cities still have not made. They need to do the same thing that Cargill does, that 3M does. It's realized that they have a huge resources right in their midst that they're not utilizing optimally. And that would be to understand that these can be ambassadors to other nations in terms of doing trade with them, in terms of attracting visitors, of attracting investors and employees to the Twin Cities.
Not just attracting, but helping them to become more adapted.
Feel comfortable.
Right, feel
comfortable. You know, I used to hear that a lot of the international companies that were hiring in the past, not today, but in the recent past, would hire people from other cultures, from other countries. After they came here and spent a couple of years, they would start to move away. And the reason why they did that, they discovered, was that they didn't feel welcome enough. Not because people were being nasty to them. We know that people in Minnesota are very nice. But because they didn't feel that international sense that is so prevalent in cities like Madison, for example, or in cities like Chicago, where it's a very powerful sensation when you go there. You sense the international feeling that prevails. And I'm sorry to say that you still don't quite feel that here, but we could easily make it happen.
We could easily make it happen.
Yes, I think
okay,
so.
so how long have you been working on this?
Well, you know, in different ways I've been working on this concept for a long time, but not specifically in cities. I used to give talks like this to corporations for many, many years. I even created a couple of positions for myself in international companies such as Prudential-based Securities, Wells Fargo Bank, where I sold this concept, but in terms of my own employment. But we're now trying to do that in terms of the cities and in terms of the Latino and other minority communities.
So how is it different working with cities then, now that you're in politics?
It's more challenging. It's more challenging because there seems to be more of a silo mentality. You know, this is my turf. Those are other things that are not connected. And so it's a bigger challenge to help people visualize how these very divergent things can come together for the betterment of the city. But I believe that it's doable, particularly because it's urgent, as you pointed out, that we do something because of the current state of the economy. We don't need to look for solutions internally, which seems to be what most people are doing. You know, when people are scared, when people are afraid, we can turn inwards. The solutions in a globalized reality are outside our cities. They're outside our state.
They're outside
our country.
Culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where the answers are. But if we don't focus in that direction, we won't see it.
Right.
We won't see the solutions. You know?
And I hope we do. Actually, we need to, in fact. So
I agree.
Think about some of the other assets that are in the minority communities or the communities of color that are often overlooked. How might those assets also help the educational gap, help close educational gap, help close economic gaps?
This is
besides
something.
business, but
This is something that I brought up during the conversations on Race to the Top. The Race to the Top instructions for the responding states was to prepare our children to compete in a global economy. And that point, in my opinion, was not sufficiently pursued. And that is precisely the area where the minority communities and the American Indian community can contribute an enormous asset. What is that? Think of it in terms of this question. If our system, our educational system, is unable to connect with those minority American Indian communities, which are divergent cultures in themselves, how is the system going to prepare the students to connect with divergent cultures in other nations? It's not possible. The process of connecting over this chasm that exists among our communities will empower teachers, principals, schools to prepare the children to connect to divergent cultures across the world.
So do you feel like they just didn't, the folks who put together this Race to the Top response, the Minnesota response?
It was the Department of Education, but it was done in consultation with many people, with teachers' unions, with the governor's office, with people in the community, with the different schools. There were hundreds of people that came together to make this happen.
And how do you think they overlooked this major issue?
Do you recall what I said earlier? If you're not looking in a certain direction, you're not seeing what's there. You see what you focus on. And if you look at at our proposal, the Minnesota proposal, you will see that the focus was on the excellence of the Minnesota educational system, which is very true, and it has been excellent for many years, and we obviously should all feel very proud about it. But we did not look at where the problems were, and problems are the road to the solutions of the future. They're there for a reason. They're there because we're not accepting the reality that is gradually evolving from globalization. The numbers that the minorities and the American Indian communities represent are no longer small enough to be ignored. Now they represent a large proportion and a growing proportion of the community. If you ignore that, you are risking that the whole chain break because of that one piece of the whole. We cannot afford to do that, and I think it can also be because of the quality of being a divergent set of cultures. It is also the connection to other peoples in other parts of the world.
If they do well.
Right.
Yes. Well, perfect final thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now, can folks find more information on your website?
Of course.
And that is?
That is www.clac.state.mn.us.
Wonderful, thank you. We do have it up on the video screen too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hector Garcia, for
Pleasure.
being here with us. And thank you so much for joining us on the St. Paul Forum.